I confronted my best friend for having an inappropriate relationship with his mother. Now, I regret ever saying anything at all. My best friend, who I grew up with, used to get teased a lot about being a mama's boy. He's always had a very weird relationship with his mother. As we got older and started getting into girls more, he would say weird stuff, and normally I'd laugh it off and call him a weirdo. When we got older, I'd tell him he needs to get out of the house more. When we were checking out chicks, he'd say stuff like, "My mom has a way better body than she could ever have," or, "My mom's balloons are way bigger," and stuff like that. As far as I could tell, it's always been him and his mom. Growing up, I had never seen him get a girlfriend. I mean, he talked to girls and stuff, but I never physically saw him have a relationship with any girl until the one he got married to. Fast forward some time, and his wife, who I'm really cool with, says to me, "I hate it when he goes on his family trips because whenever he comes back home to me, he's always cold and acts like a jerk to me." So then we started talking about his family trips, and his wife said it was just him and his mom. They do this family trip every month or so, and it started to become more frequent the longer his marriage went on. I spoke to him soon after, and just joked around about stuff pertaining to his situation. He got kinda irritated towards me and said, "What, you think I'm making love with my mom? What kind of freak does that?" I just rolled with it, kinda laughed it off and said I was just screwing with him. His reaction was not genuine at all. Weeks after, my wife and my friend's wife sat at their house and had a long discussion on how to approach this very delicate situation. We decided that it was best to just simply come out and say something, talk about what is going on and what we are feeling. His wife definitely wanted to talk about everything, but she didn't want to do it alone. So she asked if we could sit in with them and let her get down to what's really going on. Fast forward to that day, and we come over to have an intervention. I'm sitting with my wife on one couch, and him and his wife are sitting on the other couch watching TV and talking. His wife grabs the remote, turns the TV off and says, "We need to have a talk, all of us." For some reason, she chose to completely ignore everything we went over. How we were going to try and break the ice, and lightly touch on the situation and try to be welcoming, warm and understanding. How we set up little spaces so we could backtrack and everything. But no, she just went straight for the throat with, "What's going on with you and your mother? You need to be honest with me." Everything we planned went right out the window within the very first few seconds. It was like she was attacking him, backing him into a corner instead of trying to be there for him. I was angry, I won't lie, but it's his wife, so I couldn't say anything. She continued bombarding him with all these questions and accusations. When she finally let up, I was able to quickly get in and try and bring the volume of the room down a bit. I brought up stuff from our past when we were kids and in school. I also talked about some of the things he said that seemed off, and his behavior that was awkward. I laughed a little, and threw in a few jokes, and thank goodness my wife was there to laugh and back me up. But his face. He had this look of disgust and defeat. He never commented back on anything, not a single peep. He just sat there quietly, festering in his own misery. As soon as I was done, his wife immediately went back to full-on attack mode with, "You just gonna sit there while we ask you these questions? Your quietness speaks volumes." After about 30 minutes of us asking him questions and stuff, he stood up and balled his fists and finally responded. He was angry that we would suggest these things and asked us if we were all sick people and tried to turn the tables on us. That's when his wife stood up and started crying. She accused him of lying because whenever he lies, he touches his face a lot and looks at the floor, which is totally true. She started crying more and screaming, asking him very personal questions about their marriage. To that day, I was always kind of jealous of their marriage. They always seemed happier than us, never really argued, very passionate towards each other, and they never really complained. But when she started talking, wow, was I wrong. She said stuff like, "Is that why we never make love? Is it because you're out there making love with your mother? You are sick in the head. You need help, therapy, and a psychiatrist." She brought up all these things about them never being intimate, never spending time together. He never gives her compliments, treats her like crap, ignores her when she's talking to him, holds grudges against her for months at a time, and the list goes on and on. Then she stopped, started dry heaving and put her hand over her mouth, saying she's gonna throw up. My wife got up and held her. She continued to dry heave and call him a sicko. Then he just said, "Screw all of you," stormed out of the house and started walking down the street in the neighborhood. I ran up and caught up to him. I asked him to come back and calm down, and he ignored me entirely. He called his mom, and she came and picked him up a few blocks down the road where he was just standing while I tried talking to him. When he got in the car, he slammed the door, rolled down the window, and said, "Never ever talk to me again. I'm removing you out of my life for good." Then he rolled the window up, and that was the last I spoke with him. I went back to his house and tried to console his wife with the help of my wife. She told me all the issues they were having and how deep down she knew what was going on, but he was happy and she didn't know how to handle it. The following week, I went over to his mother's house. She refused to open the door and even threatened to call the police on me if I didn't leave. His wife didn't see or speak to him since the intervention, but we all knew exactly where he was. We didn't talk to my best friend for over a year after that. Then, thinking that I lost him forever, I received a very interesting call one day. It was him, and he wanted to talk. He asked to meet at our normal hangout spot, and I agreed. He said the date and time, and before I could continue to say anything else, he hung up on me. I didn't know what to think, honestly. I was happy, but I also was extremely worried. When we met up, he looked like crap. His face was pale, bags under his eyes, and he looked miserable. I ran over to him and gave him a big hug. I started crying and said how sorry I was for accusing him of that type of stuff and how he's my brother no matter what. I just spilled my guts and blabbered away at him. He hugged me back and we both cried and apologized. Two grown men, crying like babies. After the initial waterworks, we sat down. He told me how his wife had divorced him and how she spread all these lies about him and stuff on her Facebook. He had gotten fired from his job because of the lies that came from that messed up attempt at an intervention. I just sat there feeling like complete trash, knowing that I caused all of this. Just as I was about to apologize, he cut me off and said, "Wait, there is something I need to tell you, man. Remember when I was younger and my parents got that divorce and I told you that Mom got really crazy afterwards?" Yeah, I remembered. The divorce was bad and ugly. His dad had cheated on his mom with some super young chick at a fast food place. He told me that after the divorce, she started drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't even be able to take him to school or go to work the next day because she'd be so sick. The drinking only got worse. Then one day when he was 15 and sleeping in his bed, his mom came home super late and came into his room completely hammered. She then SA'd him and had the audacity to snuggle up in bed with him and pass out. After that night, she'd drink, get drunk, and then SA him. When she was sober, she'd act like nothing happened. She even started telling him that he was the man of the house and that he had certain responsibilities. This abuse continued all the way up until January 1st of that year. He told me that's when he finally had enough and put a stop to it. He said he hasn't seen or talked to his mom since then. He confessed that despite that, his life was still in shambles. That's when I just started crying, man. Like seriously crying. Here I was thinking I was his best friend, and I didn't even know what was going on all these years. He even said how he thought about unaliving himself up until he met his wife, and she took him out of that house. However, his mother would still call him over, or plan getaways, just to get him away from her. His mother hated his wife with a passion. I never knew he was suffering alone all of these years. How could I even begin to call him my best friend, or my brother? I was never ever there one time for him out of all these years he was going through stuff. He asked me to not say anything to my partner and if I could keep this between me and him. Of course I agreed without hesitation. We spoke about him getting help, and he made me promise not to say anything about this to anyone. He said he doesn't want his mom to get into any trouble, and he doesn't want her to suffer because she's already suffered enough from his dad. I could not, for the life of me, believe that all these years she's abused him, and he was still willing to sit there and protect her. He even made me promise not to do anything and said he would figure things out. Afterwards, we agreed to meet up again in the next few days. He hugged me goodbye, and we parted ways. I should have known something was off when he hugged me for a bit too long. A few days later, I got a call from his mom hysterically crying, "It's all your fault." He had unalived himself that night,